In this video, we're going to walk through all of the audio settings on your Pioneer in-dash receiver. Even though your particular in-dash receiver may be a 1-DIN model or a 2-DIN model, and may or may not have a CD slot across the top like this one, the button operation in this demonstration is identical for the following Pioneer models: MVH-S4000BT, MVH-S4000BT, FH-S500BT, DEH-S4000BT, DEH-S4010BT. So from any source, and right now we're on the auxiliary source, just press in on the volume control, and we're going to roll along here until we find the audio menu. There's audio, and we'll press enter. The first thing we see here is the EQ settings, and there is a full video about the EQ settings and how to adjust the 13-band equalizer built in here. Please be sure to check out the EQ settings video for more information. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is our fader control. Now, if you don't see a fader control on your system, that's because you have in the initial setup menu, you've chosen subwoofer for the rear speaker outputs. You've chosen subwoofer for the rear speaker outputs. If you change that initial setup menu to full range for the rear speaker outputs, you'll have a fader control. Let's go back in there. And we'll press enter to open the fader control. And this is our front to rear option. You can see we're fading to the front and spin the volume control back to fade to the rear. We'll set that about there for right now. When you're done making your adjustments on the fader, we'll press the arrow to go back, and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is our balance control, and press enter to get into the balance. And this is how we balance from right to left. And when we're done there, we can go back. Let's roll over to the next setting right now, which is subwoofer on and off. So this is our subwoofer output, and right now you can see that it is switched on. If I touch in on the volume control, we can switch the subwoofer output off. Now, take note that with subwoofer output switched off, I'm going to roll over to the next setting. And the next setting goes directly to speaker level. Now, I'm going to go back to that subwoofer output and switch it on. When we switch the subwoofer output on and roll over to the next setting, we go to a second subwoofer control, which is our phase control on the subwoofer. Right now, the subwoofer output is in its normal phase, switched on and in its normal phase. We can also switch it on and in the reverse phase. So be sure to try both of these settings in your vehicle. You might find that you like one, either normal or reverse phase, much better than the other. So for right now, I'm going to switch this on and in the normal phase, and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is to our speaker level controls. Now, this system gives you a volume control, an individual volume control or output level for each individual speaker in the system. So let's press enter here. Here you see we have an adjustment for the front left speaker, and we have an adjustment for the front right speaker. We have an adjustment for the rear left speaker, and we have an adjustment for the rear right speaker. And if we roll over one more, we have an adjustment for the subwoofer output. Each of these output settings for an individual speaker has identical controls. So we'll press in on the volume control here, and you'll see that we can make the front left output. We can go up to +10, and we can go down to -24. So that's the range of the outputs for each of the speakers, and they're all exactly the same. So I'm going to make this one, this because it's nearest to me, a -6. And I'm going to make some of my rear speakers a little bit louder here. We'll make the rear left a +1. And I'll make my rear right +2, and I'm going to make my subwoofer a +2 as well. When I'm done making my adjustments there with the speakers, I can press the arrow button to go back, and I'll roll over to the next setting, which is our crossover settings. And we'll press enter here. So the crossover settings, I have a crossover setting for the front speaker outputs and RCA outputs. I have a crossover setting for the rear speaker outputs and rear RCA outputs, and I have a crossover setting for the subwoofer. So let's start with the front speaker and RCA outputs, and I'll press enter here. And you can see we have a high pass filter that we can switch on or off. With the volume control, when we switch it on, we have a high pass filter right now at 25 Hertz is the crossover point and a 6 dB per octave slope. We can adjust the crossover point by pressing in on the volume control, and we can adjust that crossover point up higher. We have a number of different crossover points available up to 250 Hertz. For right now, I'll make my high pass filter on my front speakers 80 Hertz. And if I press in on the volume control, I can change the slope of that crossover from 6 dB per octave to 12, 18, or 24 dB per octave. So let's make that 12 dB per octave at an 80 Hertz crossover point for the front speakers. We'll go back now and roll over to the rear setting. We'll press enter to go into the rear crossover settings. You can see that right now the rear crossover settings are turned off. We'll roll over with the volume control, and we have the exact same settings here that we have for the front crossover settings. We have a high pass filter, and we can choose the exact same crossover points and the exact same slopes for each crossover point, and the front and rear are independent of one another. Here's our slope for the crossover. When we're done making the adjustments there, we can go back and roll over one more time to our subwoofer settings, and we'll press enter here. Right now the subwoofer setting is the subwoofer crossover switched off. We can switch on, and you can see that it is a low pass filter. And we'll go over to the crossover points, and we have the same crossover points available to us with a low pass filter on the subwoofer output. So we're going to choose 63 Hertz as my crossover point, and we can go from 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, or 36 dB per octave with the subwoofer crossover. So right now I'm going to make that 24 dB per octave at a crossover point of 63 Hertz. When you're done making your crossover setting adjustments, we can go back and roll over to the next setting, which is our listening position. With listening position, we can focus the stereo image to different areas of the vehicle. So we'll press in on the volume control, and right now you can see we have the listening position focused to the front left, or the driver's position. We can also choose to have it focused on the front right or on all front speakers. Turn it one more time, and this is all speakers in the vehicle. So we'll roll over one more time to switch the listening position completely off, and then you can use the audio controls how they suit you. But if you want to use your time alignment controls built into the system, you have to have the listening position set up as front left or front right. So for right now, I'm going to set this up as front left, and we'll confirm that and then roll over to the next setting, which is our time alignment settings. Now, if you don't see the time alignment setting here, there's a couple of things that you might have set incorrectly in the audio settings. First is your position. If you don't have the front left or the front right position, you will not see the time alignment setting. So for right now, we're going to choose the front left position, and we're going to go back. And also, if you don't have the subwoofer output switched on, again, you will not see the time alignment setting. So subwoofer has to be switched on, and listening position has to be set to either front left or front right in order for you to see this setting, time alignment. So we'll enter the time alignment setting here, and we have three different things happening here. We have the initial setting. We have, let's roll over here, we can switch time alignment off, and we have a custom setting for time alignment. So first, let's talk about the initial setting. This is based on the listening position that you've selected. So right now we have the front left listening position selected. So that is our initial time alignment setting. If we roll over to the next setting here, we can switch time alignment off. This sets all of the time alignment settings to 0, and you're not using any type of time alignment. And then we have the custom setting here, and if we press in on the volume control, you can see our custom settings. This is the front left speaker, and it is set to 47 inches from the driver's position, listening position. So all of the settings that you see here, since we've chosen the front left driver's position, the front left listening position, these are the initial settings set up by the system. So the front left speaker is 47 inches away from the driver's position. Well, let's go back in there. If we roll over to the next setting, this is the front right speaker. That is the passenger side, 61 inches from the driver's listening position. We'll roll over to the next setting. Rear left speaker, 33 inches away. Rear right speaker, 52 inches away. And the subwoofer at 63 inches away. So if these are reasonable settings for your vehicle, you don't need to change anything. If you want to change any of them, you certainly can. So front left, if I'm the driver, front left is fairly close to me, but maybe I want to make it a little further away. So I'll press in on the volume control, and I will make this 50 inches away. We'll press in on the volume control again and change to the front right speaker or the passenger side front speaker. We'll press in on the volume control, and we'll make it just a little closer. We'll make it 60 inches. And we will press in on the volume control and roll over to the rear left speaker. Right now it's set at 33 inches. We'll make it 35. Press in on the volume control. Go to the rear right speaker, 52 inches away. We'll make it just a little closer at 50. Press in on the volume control. Roll over to the subwoofer setting, 63 inches away. We're going to make that a little further. We'll make that 70 inches away. And those are my custom settings. Now you can change these custom settings to whatever suits your vehicle and literally take a tape measure and measure the distance from your ear to that particular speaker and put in that number here in inches. When you're done making your adjustments there, you can go back and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is where we can save our settings. Now, if we say save settings here, and yes, we're going to save our equalizer settings, our subwoofer settings, our fader and balance control settings, our time alignment settings, all of that. We will, if you like what you hear, you can just press agree yes, and you've saved those settings. Now you can go back and make adjustments to that at any time, and if you want to load the settings that you saved, you can come right here and load those sound settings. You have one memory setting to work with. It will remember one setting that you have saved. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is our dynamic bass control. And right now you can see dynamic bass is switched off. Also, this big bass button right on the bottom here is switched for this as well. If I press in on the volume control, we have the dynamic bass setting set to its low output. We can also change it to its high output. And if we touch it one more time, we can switch it off. Now, let's go out to our source for a moment. We have the dynamic bass setting set to low. Let's go back out to the source. Here we are out at auxiliary, and you can see we have the dynamic bass is switched on and in its low position. If we touch the dynamic bass setting here, that switches it off. If we touch it again, that switches it on and to the low position. Touch this again, that switches it off again. If we want to change that to the high position, we need to go back to the audio settings to do that. So let's go back into audio, and here's our dynamic bass control. If we want to use the high dynamic bass control, you need to switch it to its high output level based on the audio settings menu. Once you've chosen what you like, you can roll over to the next setting, and we're off to the loudness control. Right now, loudness is switched off. We can press in on the volume control and switch loudness on low, mid, or high. Typically, loudness is used to help things sound more natural at low volume levels. At higher volume levels, you don't need loudness as much. So we're going to switch loudness on to its low position, and we'll roll over to the next setting, which is SLA, or Source Level Adjuster. Now remember, at the beginning of this video when we started, we were on the auxiliary source. And we are on the auxiliary source now, and we can adjust the volume of the auxiliary source as compared to AM and FM. So we can make the auxiliary source a little louder or a little quieter as compared to AM FM. So for right now, I'm going to make the auxiliary source +1 compared to AM FM. Now this also works on the CD source. Anything that you have plugged in through USB or anything that is played back through Bluetooth, you will have the SLA or source level adjuster available for those sources. If you are on the AM/FM source and you come through the audio settings, you will not see the SLA option here because all of the other volume levels are compared to FM. The idea here is when I switch between sources, I will not hear a big jump in volume from one source to the next. So let's roll over to the next setting now, which is back around to our EQ settings. When you're done making your audio adjustments here, you can just press the go back button to escape.